So it's awesome to see everybody here today. For those that are going to be watching the video, I know there were some folks that were talking about coming in online or watching the video later on. And so I usually start off with a song, but I'm just going to talk about what we're going to go through today, which is teachings of the Mihkiwahp, and then also how the Indian Act was very violent in its way of removing Indigenous women's traditional roles within our nations and nationhood. When we think about the treaties, when we talk about the treaties, one aspect that was left out within those treaty agreements was the presence of Indigenous women. There were women councils that did, consult and meet with the messengers and the men and the chiefs who were sent forward. However, they were not consulted with one-on-one. And to colonization, a lot of our roles as Indigenous women were very much, very kind of like flipped around, where a lot of our nations, I know within my nation as Cree people, we are matrilineal nations. We're very, we had matriarchal nations, so a lot of our clan systems and our society systems were passed down from our mom and our grandmothers, and how that was flipped around during the Indian Act when they implemented the status Indian policy. So we're going to talk about some beautiful teachings, and a lot of these teachings that I learned over the years in ceremony come from just a lot of aunties in community, as well as even taking traditional family parenting, which I now facilitate with my cousin. Her name's Raven Hart. And we do a lot of this work together, and so a lot of these teachings just came from my aunties like Dr. Meyer Laramie, the late Janet Fox, other aunties within the community that we got to learn from and spend time with in ceremony just over the years. And also my late auntie Ivana Hart, who's my cousin's mom, which was really awesome. Like, she passed away, I want to say about 8-ish years ago, and we're still finding scripts that she wrote about teachings in the Mihkiwahp and things like that. So a lot of this has come from just the older women, Indigenous women. So I don't own any of these. I don't own this information. I always tell people that whatever I share, feel free to share in community, because within this belongs to our community. So if you're working with Indigenous folks or Indigenous young people, this belongs to them. And so everybody, I always tell people, you have permission to share. You have permission to share these teachings. Like I said, I'm just someone who learned them, carrying them forward, and sharing them. So they don't belong to me. So yeah. So I'm going to start with a song here. And I usually start off with a song always before doing any type of teaching or program or anything like that. I really firmly believe that learning is ceremony. And in ceremony, because like a lot of our elders, they often say like, back in the days, you would be learning this within like a Mihkiwahp. Sorry, I'm just like, I came from a walk and it takes me a while to cool down. I literally walked here for like 20 minutes, so, okay. So traditionally, we would be learning this either in a Medewi Wind Lodge or like a Mihkiwahp or something. And a Medewi Wind Lodge just basically means like a heart lodge, because that word Mede is in there and it means heart. And shout out to my mom, she's sitting here. Her and my dad, I often call them all the time, and I'm like, how do you say this in Cree? What does this mean? How come we say this? And my mom and dad, they still speak the language. My dad's from Pagadawagan, so he speaks TH. My mom's from God's River, she speaks N dialect. So I always try to learn as much from them, within the language, because so many of our teachings and the way that our people govern themselves and lived life, even way back in the day, a lot of the blueprints come from the language. And even words in the language, they have whole meanings and stories, and it's one word has a whole paragraph, and even if it's just one word, it has a whole story behind it. So I would urge people that the language is something that is really transformative in teachings and also in knowledge sharing. So anyways, Medewi Wind Lodge is actually over here. I don't know if the Green Bridge, I think it's still closed, hey? Yeah. But on that side, they have a big, beautiful lodge, and so that's what those ones would be. I think in Ojibwe they call it Medewi Wind. Very similar. So anyways, because learning is a process of transference of knowledge, sometimes when we learn things or, we hear something, maybe when we're out during the day, like we'll have those aha moments. And, those moments when you're doing dishes and it's like, oh yeah, like that's what that was, or that's what that meant. Or maybe years later it'll make sense. So for me, when we share this powerful, any type of stories, information, it's very like a ceremony for me or to me. So I'm going to start with a song. I have my CC one here. This one was here made by David Blacksmith back in 2019. My cousin and I, we come from a singing group. We're called Kind Heart Women Singers. And we sing alongside her daughters, which is Caitlin and Skyla and Hart. And then also my cousin's partner, her wife, who's Dee. And we sing together. And when we first started singing, we use song a lot in a lot of the healing work that we do. So if we're in ceremony or doing counseling, things like that, especially when we're fatting people down, we'll sing songs during that process. And the way that I understand about songs is that when you're singing a prayer song, it's like you're praying twice, because you're usually singing a prayer and then you're also praying at the same time, or else other people are praying with you during that time, so it's like praying twice. And we got an opportunity to sing with Elder Winston Whitney a few years ago, and he was telling us, he said every time you sound the sisigwan, the rattle, he said everything after that becomes like a prayer. Like it becomes whatever information you're sharing, they get called in to witness whatever is going on, and then from there they go back and they talk about what happened. And when I say they, I mean like spirits, whatever those are here. Korea, we call them Pawaganak. Pawaganak are like your spirit helpers. Or else some people will say like Musamak, Egonokomak, which is just like your grandmothers and grandfathers. And so the Sisigwan, what I learned about it, I actually learned this teaching from Elder Wilfred Buck. I sundanced at his lodge for a few years, and I've known him for a number of years and his family, and he would always share, things during ceremony that really stuck with me over the years. And what was really beautiful was he would talk about it in the language in Cree, and then he would share the translation of it. And so that really stuck with me in like learning the language a little bit. But he said Sisigwan, it comes from the word, like there's the word springtime in it, which is Sigwan. And so what he shared one time was that the rattle, when it makes the sound, he said if you ever have the opportunity to go sit by like a river where there's no traffic, it's nice and quiet, and you go sit by that river during springtime. Because in our culture, Cree culture, we have 6 seasons. We have summer, we have fall. Right now we're in the freeze up season. That's when the ice is freezing up. And then we have Gibun, which is winter. And then after that, we have the breakup season. And I always tell people, it's not when you break up with your old man or old lady. I would say it's when the ice is breaking up. And then after that is the springtime. And then so he said during that breakup season, if you sit there, you can hear the sound. And he said that's like the ice crystals going in between like the sheet of ice and the water. And it's like bouncing. And so during that time, before like in springtime, Sigwan, that's when everything wakes up. So to our people, when they would hear that sound, that was like a really powerful sound, because they were like, that's when everything wakes up. Everything wakes up to that sound. The animals, creation, medicines, everything, which is why this is called the Sisigwan. So it mimics that sound. And also there's so many other stories. Some of our creation stories as Indigenous people, they talk about how in the center of Misawa, which is the universe, there is a sound that vibrates. It's like a hum. And it's really cool because if you research this hum, NASA talks about it, other cultures around the world, they talk about this hum, this vibration. And, and some of the stories that I've heard, even from the Anishinaabe people, the Ojibways, they say that Creator sits in the center of the universe and has a rattle and shakes that rattle and is constantly creating. And, remember Wilfred would always say, we were all created by just a thought. Kisik Manitou just had a thought, and then we were created. And he would always say that's how powerful your thoughts are too, because you have that little bit of spark from Kisik Manitou. Your thoughts also have power too, a little bit, but in that way. And so this sound also has stories about that, being in the center of the universe and how it vibrates out. So I'll start off with a song, and I think I'll start off with a grandmother song. It was just full moon. We had full moon ceremony on Monday, and so this song actually came to me and my family. So when I talk about being like a lodge carrier, I'm not saying that I myself carry lodges. It's me and my family that does. Like Raven, she's a cook. I help co-facilitate with her. And one of the lodges that we do is the full moon ceremony, and the girls, like my nieces, have been in that lodge since they were babies. And the full moon ceremony, we would do full moon, and we haven't lately, but we want to do it again. But we would have full moon at the Thunderbird House for a couple years, and I remember that woman would come in like when it was minus 30 below, minus 40 wind chill, and they would come like January, February, really, really intense winter nights, and we'd have like 30, 40 women there. And my family was also there a few times, my mom, my sister, and the girls. And we had so many women in that circle. And so during that time, this melody came, and I was telling my cousin about it, and she's like, maybe that one belongs to the full moon, or talks about the grandmothers. So because we're going to talk about the Mihkiwahp, but just a little bit of what I know, there's so much more about it. I only know a little bit. This song is a grandmother song, and it talks about just giving thanks to Grandmother Moon for all that she does, but also that just also all of our grandmothers, and that we love them in that way. So it's in Cree, and it's a full moon song, but it's also a grandmother song. So I'll start off with this one here. Okay, so that will get started. And at any point, as I'm sharing, if you have any questions or comments, I always tell folks, feel free to just share, or be like, hey, like what about this, or what does that mean, etc. And then from there, I'll try my best to answer. Like I don't know everything, so I'll try my best. If I don't know something, then maybe we can figure out a way to find somebody that maybe knows that knowledge. Okay, so if you guys hear me if I just talk like this, yeah? Do you think that'll be okay for the recording? Okay. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Mihkiwahp, and the Mihkiwahp is how we say Tipi in Cree. So Tipi is actually the Dakota word, so when you say Tipi, you're actually speaking Dakota. So Mihkiwahp, I have to be tall here, is, and there's different ways people spell it. There's different dialects that people will pronounce the word Mihkiwahp. I've heard people say Mihkiwahp, and different ways, but this is how I say it. And so, I forgot an H here. Hold on. I usually like to put an H there, just to kind of emphasize the. And there's actually my niece's word. One of my nieces, her name is in here. Mihkiwahp. Miko. Okay. Mihkiwahp. So the word Mihkiwahp, the first part actually, the word mi comes from the word Miko. And this is my niece's name, Miko. Shout out to Miko. She's like 7 years old. So Miko and then Mihkiwahp. So this word here is the color red, but it also talks about the color blood. So my older niece's name, her name's Nibi. This is water. And then Miko, blood. So water, blood. So that's my sister's creation there, her ideas. So Miko, red blood. And so what this word Mihkiwahp talks about, it basically, one of the teachings that we learned from Janet Fox, from Traditional Family Parenting, was that it talks about from the source. From the source. But it also talks about that word of that blood, and within our way of life traditionally, moon time or that menstruation was something that wasn't as taboo or considered the way that it is today. Moon time, is when one of our young women, they first have their moon time, we take them through a coming of age ceremony. So with our nieces, Caitlin, Sky, Nipi, they all went through their coming of age ceremony already. Not to put them on the spot, but during that coming of age ceremony, and what we do is the berry fast. And some people have heard about the berry fast, different ways to do the berry fast. But essentially what it is that for an entire year, that young person won't eat any type of berries that are traditional to the region. So blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, saskatoons. And not only will they not eat the berries, but they won't even eat artificial flavor of like even any type of soap, lotions, shampoos, nothing. Not even like candies. And that for them is to teach them kind of like that delayed gratification, and also self-discipline, but also self-advocacy for them to say, no, I can't have berries. I'm on my moon time, to be able to be assertive as young Indigenous women. Okay, so that's where that comes from, is that story of that menstruation, but also that birthing ceremony too. Because as Native women, Indigenous women, we birth our nations, right? Whoever your mom is, that's who your nation is. If she's Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, Ojibwe, Métis, whatever that is, that's who you are, because the mom is the one that raises the baby into that culture. So the Mihkiwahp belongs to the woman. In our teachings, it's the woman that own that Mihkiwahp. And so I'm just gonna draw. Hopefully it's, I'm gonna use a darker color here. Hold on.
just so you guys can see. And if you can't see, let me know. I'll draw it bigger. So I'm just gonna draw it because there's people over there too that are gonna be watching this. So here's a Miki. It's a very crooked Mihkiwahp, but whatever. It's a Mihkiwahp. So here's a Mihkiwahp here, and you know, we have the tarps, or not the tarps, but the 2 poles out there, and I think someone will have to keep for time because I could talk and talk, so someone will have to, because people have to go back for lunch, from lunch. Okay, so there is 13 poles. I'll write it here on this side. There's 13 poles within, and then there's 2 poles. These are the 2 poles here, 14, 15. So inside there's 13 poles. And when we talk about the Mihkiwahp and how it belonged to the woman, and I remember one time at Sundance, we were finishing up. This was the Nelson House. We were finishing our ceremony, and we were just getting ready to close off everything, and we were doing our last round there. Wilfred was sharing before we did our last dance, where he said, you know, he said, I really want to acknowledge the Iskotew here, the woman here, and he said, as men, you know, we really need to unlearn some of the things that we've learned. And he was just kind of talking about some of the harms that have been done, especially with our sisters missing murder, things like that. And then he was saying, he shared, he said, so many of our lodges are framed after you and who you are and your bodies, and so many of our lodges come from you, yet we're still learning about even how to respect you as a result of colonization. So when he talked about that, and I talked to some of the older women that would talk about these teachings, I realized that so many of our lodges come from the woman. Like the Sweat Lodge is the shape of the womb. The Mihkiwahp is literally the shape of a woman. What else? Even like in some teachings with the Sundance, you know, it's a Thunderbird nest, hey? That's usually from the female energy that has those babies in that nest and creates it. So there's just different, and every nation has different teachings. So I just want to give a disclaimer that other nations would have different stories about their different, I guess, lodges. But this one, the way I understand it and was taught, was that this represents the skirt of a woman. So these 2 here are like her arms going up like this. So if you stand, she's wearing her skirt and her arms are going up like this. And inside that skirt represents that canvas. And whatever she's pulling up her arms like this because we have, you know, the 7 directions, right? The Mihkiwahp has a circle here. Inside there's a circle. That's the medicine wheel. But not only is she calling from those 4 directions, she's also calling from above. And above is that star world, all those star nations, all those star teachings. And she's pulling in all that beautiful energy from up there and bringing it into her home space. So that's what I was told. That was from Dr. Mara Laramie. She talks about that, how it's a woman and she pulls into herself. But also what's really beautiful, and we'll talk about it later, we'll talk about these ones here, is that it also represents the babies. And we'll get to that. So there's the 13 poles, and I always like to ask, why do you think it's 13? Because usually we have, you know, we're conditioned as a society to think that the number 13 is like a bad number, or like you know, an evil number or something like that, hey? So why do you think it's 13? What do we have in a natural phenomenon that is 13 each year? The moons. The full moons. Yeah, grandmother moon. She's full 13 times. And within those 13, from 21 to 28 days is a full moon, but that's also, we call it moontime menstruation. Right? Is the woman's cycle. And so there's 13 poles here, and each pole has different teachings on them, different protocols, different kind of laws that as a family should follow in regards to having a healthy home. So in the center, so there's 13 poles, the 14 and 15. These two are basically what we call the direction poles. And this one just kind of speaks about how, however we direct these poles, will either smoke out our Mihkiwahp, or will carry that smoke out and make it clear in there. So, my cousin, she always says, especially to our women, when we actually have a Mihkiwahp program, we do a Mihkiwahp program with young moms that is based out of this lodge. She says, whatever we choose every single day as parents or as caregivers, as matriarchs of our home, that can either smoke out our home and our vision, or it can create it clear. And traditionally, as matriarchs, whatever we choose within our space is what affects the environment. So that just talks about the I guess, kind of choice, whatever choices we make daily. Okay. So in the center of this Mihkiwahp, there's this beautiful fireplace. And this fireplace is the one that sits in the center of so many of our ceremonies. Every lodge you go to will have a fire. And if you go to traditional powwows, they'll also have a sacred fire. And so I'm just going to ask, what are some, for folks that have gone around sacred fires, what are some of the teachings that you hear about them, like the kind of do's and don'ts? Anybody can answer.
Don't have your phone.
Yeah, like don't have your phone, so like be present, right, be respectful. What kind of things can you put in that fire? Can you put like an old Tim Hortons cup? No. A cigarette butt? Yeah, just medicine, okay? So you can only put medicines in there and offerings, so berries and things like that, right? They always say like to not put caca in there. Caca in Cree means like garbage. Means like caca. So to not put anything in there that will harm that fire. And so in Cree and also Ojibwe, I've actually learned this word from some Ojibwe relatives, and it's very similar. It's the same exact teaching. The word for flame. Sorry, I'll move on this side and I'll write. The word for flame, so this is Cree, this is Ojibwe. So the word for flame is Iskotew, and how do you say this? Iskotew? Iskotew, yeah. As my sister knows, she said she's going to name someone Iskotew next time. There we go. Now Iskotew. Iskotew. I just wanted to quiz them because I know that this was my sister was talking about that. Anyways, so Iskotew and Iskotew. Iskotew is an Anishinaabe. So there's two words that are inside both of these. So isk comes from the word iskwel. Does anybody know Cree? What does iskwel mean? Not my mom? Huh? Yeah, a woman. Woman, yeah. It's a woman. And then they, ode. Does anybody speak Ojibwe? What's ode? Heart. Yeah. Ode is heart. Remember how in Korea I said midday? Midday is heart too. Midday, ode. Right? So you put these words together, iskote, ishkode, for the word fire. That translates to a woman's heart. Is basically the teaching about that word fire. So back in the old days, when our men would go through their coming of age ceremonies, I remember hearing some stories from some men, just kind of around and throughout the years, and they would say that for some men, for some of the young guys, they would go sit on the land for however many days in order to work on that relationship with Mother Earth. So then that way, they would learn how to be healthy partners, healthy uncles, healthy brothers, etc. So in this fire teaching, what they talk about is that the reason why we don't put kaka in there is because traditionally it's the woman that carries the home. So if there is kaka that's being put inside her heart, how do you think that's going to affect the home? How do you think that's going to affect the babies? Okay, so there could potentially be turmoil. So that's why, that center fireplace represents the woman and that emotional aspect and that care in those teachings and that well-being. But not only that it's also the babies that also have a center point within this lodge, because our babies, our Waspison, are center in everything. And in our language, the Cree language, the word for children, we say Awasisak. Awasisak is just plural. Awasisak means like children, like kids, a bunch of them. Awasisak is one. This word translates to a light being or star being. See how so many words in our language have so many teachings? And so in our understanding, when our babies are sent forward, they're loaned to us, right? They're loaned to us from the spirit world, and it's our duty as aunties, moms, parents, family members, cookums, whatever that is, to take care of them. So that way, whatever they're coming here for, they're able to do that work in a healthy way, in a loving way, because they come from the stars. But when I said that this one talks about that source, and our babies are represented from coming from that source of that spirit world, we have a creation story that talks about Pekone Kisik. Does anybody know what Pekone Kisik is? Do you ever look? Do you ever have a chance to? If you ever notice, if you ever have, I think you'll probably see it when it's clear. I don't know if you see it in the winter time, because I know we have different constellations that come out. But if you ever have the chance and you look outside and you're outside the city, you'll see this cluster of stars. Do you ever see those little clusters? They call it Pleiades constellation. I remember when I was a little girl, when I was up north, I used to go to Pugatawagan to see my Auntie Harriet. She's my dad's oldest sister. And I remember we'd be walking around late at night sometimes, and I would look up, and I just remember being small and always being called to those cluster of stars, and I would always ask her, what is that? What is that? And she would say, I don't know what that is. It's just stars. I was like so curious, but she could never give me an answer. She's like, I don't know, it's just stars. But I was always like called to it. Like as a little kid, I was like, oh, I don't know, there's something like really special about it. But as I got older now, what our stories talk about is those cluster of stars. We call it Pekone Kisik. And Pekone Kisik is the hole in the sky. Hole in the sky. And that hole in the sky, with the naked eye, if you're looking at it, you can count about 7 to 8 of them that are clustered together. And that's where our star blanket comes from. So the star blankets that we have as Indigenous people, if you count them, they have 7 or 8. And that's the hole in the sky. And in those stories, they say that that hole in the sky is like a gateway or a doorway that we come through from the spirit world to this world. And when we're born, this birthing ceremony, when we come through, it represents like we're here now physically as a human being, whether you're Anishinaabe, Ininu, etc. And Ininu in my language, in our language, it means a human being of the 4 directions, a human being of the 4. And so it's mind, body, spirit, emotion, the 4 directions, the 4 firstborns. We have creation stories about that. So this one just talks about all of that. It's all from the stars. Just remember how I said she's reaching up, pulling in all that star knowledge and into that Mihkiwahp. How much time are we right now? 22 minutes. Okay, cool. Awesome. I was like, okay. So with the Waspison, the babies are beautiful babies. We have babies in our family. They're spoiled. I spoil them lots. This one here also talks about the moss bag. You guys ever see a moss bag? So in Cree we call it Waspison. Waspison. How do you say it? Waspison. Yeah. So this one here is a moss bag. And when baby is in a moss bag, I'll draw baby here. And my niece Nipi had a moss bag when she was small. Here's baby. We tie them up. We have a rope here. And they usually have all these beautiful designs. Some of them have frills, beautiful beadwork, artwork. Here's baby, happy baby. And a really big smile there. So with baby, what the moss bag represents, this is a little bit of, we talk about this in TF Patron traditional value parenting training. The moss bag represents the baby's first diaper, but also the connection to the uterus. So it reminds baby of when they were in the womb. And there's a whole bunch of teachings that that goes into that. But like back in the old days, and even today, a lot of people, when they have their babies, if their family has a clan, their family has spirit colors, or their baby's spirit name, usually the moss bag would be intricate with all these beautiful designs that would talk about babies, about who they are, who they come from. And same thing with the Mihkiwahp. So back in the old days, if you were to go to a different camp, you would tell which camp was Ojibwe, which one was Dakota, which one was Cree, based on the designs that were on those Mihkiwahp there. And you would also see like whose Mihkiwahp belonged to which family, because you could see the designs and the colors. And you would say, oh, that's so-and-so's family, because they come from the bear clan, the wolf clan, whatever that is. So how it relates to the moss bag is that if you flip this upside down, this here, the same number of pegs that we have in a Mihkiwahp and a Tipi is usually the same number that they have where they tie baby up like this inside a moss bag. So this basically resembles that moss bag, just kind of upside down, okay? So here baby would be here, this would be the moss bag, like that. And not only that, but the doorway, and this is where we kind of get into like sexuality, healthy sexuality. Because traditionally, you know, sex and the way that we view that birthing ceremony is something that today is kind of like hush-hush. It's kind of like we're kind of more so trying to more talk about it today, but it's very like people get shy about it, or there's a lot of shame around it, hey? However, traditionally, there was none of that. Like traditionally, it was very openly talked about and very openly well known. So the word for door is, what is this word? Iskotem. I would say, hey, Iskotem, doorway. Yeah. And so I'm going to ask again, same thing with so Iskotew, Iskotew. What do you recognize in this word? Iskotem. The word woman, again. Right? Iskwel. So the word for doorway is again connected to the woman. And it's the same thing in the sweat lodge. You know, the sweat lodge is that birthing ceremony. When you go in, you're reborn. That doorway that you come out head first, again, baby here, head first, that represents that vaginal canal, that opening. And so, this is what I mean by so many of these ceremonies and teachings talk about the woman and the woman's bodies, and not necessarily in a way to objectify them, but in a way to honor that natural process of that moon time, that, you know, when we have our moon, that we have that ability to bring in that life, to bring in those babies to our nation. And so that's what that talks about, is just that honoring of that moon time, or just that connection into that femininity. Yeah, so I know we only have a few minutes. And so this is how it was before in the past, and we're still bringing it back today. So many of our people are relearning. And this is just a little bit of what I know about the Mihkiwahp. There's so much more. There's probably so much more teachings about that I haven't learned yet, that are connected to this beautiful lodge. So when the Indian Act came in 1976, there was actually, and I really want to find these journals, because I remember we talked a lot about these journals in university. We would talk about this during Indigenous Studies courses and just other classes in colonization, and how missionaries, whether they were French or British, etc., they would talk about and write about and journal about how when they first came to Turtle Island here, especially in our territory in these parts, they would say how kind of shocked they were, and how much sovereignty Indigenous women had, and how much sovereignty that, you know, they would ask the men during the fur trade industry, like, hey, can we do this? Are you able to do this? And a lot of the men would say, well, we have to consult with the woman first. Like, we just can't up and go. We have to talk to the woman. And that was something that was so very different in that kind of, their way of life, which was very patriarchal. So part of the Indian Act is one of the ways that they really wanted to remove a lot of these teachings and a lot of these worldviews was with the status Indian. So in status, for those that don't know, we have different types. So there's, let me see if I have enough room here. Oh, I have lots of stuff here. Okay. So if you guys can see, oh, it's late. And I'll just talk about this quickly, and we'll do question and answers, because I realize that time can fly really fast. So there's 6'1" and there's 6'2". So it wasn't until about 1989 that as Indigenous women, if we married someone who was non-status, we would lose our status. So that meant that I, per se, would lose my status to my mom's community. I wouldn't be status to God's River. I would not have any connection anymore. And so in 1989, I can't remember which family it was, with or a group of women, they actually took Canada to the Supreme Court and talked about that part of the Indian Act and said, we need to change that, because traditionally it was our women through these teachings that would give nationhood to our babies. And it's still, you know, like status Indian is still something that is really very, very detrimental to our nationhoods today. So 6'1" basically just means if someone is 6'1", that means both of their parents are 6'1" Indians, and then they would be 6'1". However, if a 6'1" Indian, per se, was to have a baby with someone who was non-status, then that baby would move down, say down, quotation, to 6'2". So 6'2", basically, if this person who's 6'2" had a baby with someone who was not registered, their babies would then lose status. However, in 2010, again, they went to the Supreme Court, and there's now 6'2"S. So it can go down one more, and then after that, it's lost. It's not lost in that way. However, if a 6'2" has a baby with a 6'1", their baby is 6'1". And it just kind of goes back and forth like that. So the Indian Act, and I know I didn't get enough time to really talk about the Indian Act, but was really put forward to trying to erase a lot of this and a lot of that matriarchy and matrilineal teachings that our nations have towards the woman's roles. And you know, when we talk about the treaties, again, that was one aspect or one voice that was really left out a lot, was the woman, and things like that. So does anybody have any questions or connections or any type like stories that are arising or connected to any of this that we talked about? Or just any questions? If there's any that are kind of like, hey, like you talked about this but didn't really go into it, is there something about that you know more about? Or
what about the direction of the doorway? And like how the teepee faces?
Yeah. So there's different directional teachings for each nation, and it's really beautiful because I remember, like even with the sweat lodge, I remember with the sweat lodge, I did some work with Elder Wamadi Wakita. We used to work at Marymount, and he used to come in and was one of our elders there. And I remember when he built, he's Dakota, when he built the sweat lodge, it would face the west. And so that was super different, hey, because in the Anishinaabe teachings, the west is like very like taboo, because that's where in their teaching spirits go through to the spirit worlds. And Ojibways would face theirs to the east, because that's where the sun rises. So in Cree teachings, what I was taught and told is that we face the south. Because we're a northern people, that's when the birds come back. So for us, when the birds and the geese and all them come back, that represents life, because up north the winters are harsh, hey? So it depends on which nation. I know within our nation, my cousin is also doing this a lot too. We're facing ours a lot towards the south, because she's also from Nelson House. And her dad's actually from White Earth, Minnesota, so she's wanting to talk about, so we more so face ours to the south. So whenever I do any type of pipe ceremony, I always start off with the south, just because that's what they would face theirs. Yeah. So it's just different. Yeah. And there's lots of beautiful stories about the birds. Even old stories that I heard. I don't know them though, but you know, birds are very very important and pivotal in a lot of our lodges and teachings. Any more? Yes.
On the weekend, I was with a Cree knowledge keeper.
Yeah.
And she was talking about the freezing water moon. And she mentioned grandmother spider
Oh, yes.
represented
Yeah.
in the rope that hangs down. Can you
Yes.
say more about that?
Yeah, so grandmother spider, she's the one, so Pekone Kisik, the story goes is that she is the grandmother that sits by that doorway. So when we're lowered here, she spiritually is represented by that umbilical cord. So when our babies are born, and the umbilical cord is cut, we're no longer physically connected to the spirit world, and that represents just her spider web. And so there's actually in the constellations, in Cree constellations, we actually have like a spider that represents her, because she's the one that governs this doorway, Pekone Kisik. And also with that, I remember hearing teachings from elders, they would say if you see a spider, to not kill it or squish it, because they say that's like your grandmother coming to check up on you. Yeah, and she's like, yeah, so grandmothers are really important. I know she was like, it's okay, it's okay. Honestly, sometimes, you know, you gotta do what you gotta do, so. Thank you, goodbye. No, just kidding, but yeah, and then my mom would also say, like, even around moon time, so even that grandmother too, that energy, she would say, like in Cree, when someone's on their moon, they would say, how do you say kokomena? How do you say it again? No, when you would say, like, is your grandma with you? Or like you're with your grandmas or something, like when someone's on their time. Anyway, she would say it, but it basically means she'll remember it. She'll remember it after. But it basically means like your grandmothers are with you. So that's that tie again to that Pekone Kisik and that moon time, hey? Yeah. Yeah. Dagusin. Yeah, Dagusin Koko. Yeah, it's your grandmother with you, yeah. Yeah.
When I was young, my dad used to hang the umbilical cord in the bush or in a tree somewhere.
That's
And he always, that's a teaching I got, and I kind of forgot it for a while.
Yeah.
I just remembered it when I started healing myself.
Yeah.
And so that's something that it's very important
Yeah.
to do that
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah.
And the other one I wanted to ask you was the Tikanagan.
Vegan.
The same as the other one?
Yeah.
The same as the mouse bag?
Yeah, but that's the one you put like the board. Yeah, the same thing. Okay. Yeah, the Vegan. Yeah. So you would have the board with the moss bag. Yeah.
The swing.
Oh yeah, the swing.
The
Yeah,
swing,
same thing with the swing too. Yeah, same thing with the swing. And with the swing, so what's really important about, I don't know if you've ever seen like the swings that we use for babies, but we usually tie them across the room and then baby swings back and forth like this. So what that does is it helps their brain on, because we have the left and right hemisphere, with the water, because we all have water inside our ears, it actually builds up immunity and some of those motor skills in that learning. Yeah, so it really helps baby. Yeah, to strengthen their immunity, their immune system, their balance, coordination, all of that. Yeah, so like a lot of things that our people do and have done is like really very highly profound child psychology. Again, it's all about like preparing that baby, hey, so they come forward into a beautiful life so that whatever it is they're meant to do here, they do that in a healthy way. Yeah, so yeah. Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome though. I didn't know that. That's the first time I heard that. And then my mom knows, and she never told me. So. Today, so that's cool. Yeah.
What about that one that ties all the things together?
Mm-hmm.
The string that ties everything together?
Yeah.
Can you say something about that?
The string.
That ties the whole together?
Oh yes, this one here. Yes. Yeah, so this one here, this one that ties everything together, there's a lot of teachings that people will talk about this, but when we have all the 13, 14 poles, when they're all tied together, again, that's that health that goes around this Mihkiwahp, but also that it takes community to come together to raise that baby or those children, but to also take care of each other. So that everything comes together. In Korea, we call it like Wakotuin. Wakotuin just means like everything all comes together, everything's related. Okay? So that's one of our laws that we have. And one thing I forgot to talk about with the 13, 15 TP polls is that they also talk, this is traditional parenting, is that they talk about those years from when baby is 0 to 7, 7 to 12, 12 to 21. And each 3 polls talks about different laws that you would teach babies within those age years and different coming of ages that they would go through. So I think the first 3 are obedience, respect, and I think compassion. I always get them mixed up, but obedience basically, it doesn't mean to be obedient in a way where you have to absolutely listen, but it means to be obedient in a way of, discipline when someone is kind of, because we teach babies a lot, like don't do that, don't go there, you're gonna get boo-boo, things like that, okay? But it also teaches us as obedience, as people, as human beings, that whenever Spirit tells us something to do, so sometimes we go to ceremony, we get direction. Sometimes we have dreams, we get direction. Or someone has a dream about us and gives us direction. That means being obedient to Spirit, that whatever it is they're asking us to do, that we're going to do it. Yeah. So just kind of in that sense of the spiritual world, of that building up of that connection. And then just all of those coming together with that rope that we pull every time we put a new pole, that you're bringing all that together in a collective way. Yeah.
So the rope that ties the poles together, from that, is there a string that comes down that's the grandmother's spider? Represents the grandmother's, or is it secured at the top?
It's I honestly can't remember right now. But with the grandmother's spider, like that talks about, again, that grandmother coming to visit.
Right.
Yeah.
Or someone maybe who was built a teepee would know.
Yeah, because I put up teepees. We actually have a teepee, but my mind's blank. What do we do with that string? Yeah, I'm pretty sure we usually leave it up because you don't see it hanging anywhere.
You don't,
we just leave it. Yeah, we just tie it up. It's usually up there. Yeah.
Can I go through those stitches? I'm trying to remember where it goes.
Well, the stitches, we actually, because they have holes and we use the pegs to put them through.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know where it goes.
Yeah,
But I
sure, because I think it stays up there. Yeah. I remember. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So we have 5 more minutes left. I'm thinking maybe we'll just, I know some people need to leave for lunch. Maybe I'll do a closing song just to close, and then if anybody has questions after, I'll be here for a bit. Yeah. Okay. So I'll do a quick closing song. This is a gratitude song. This is one of Wilfred's songs. This one just says thank you over and over again in Korean. I'll just do one push-up just to kind of let them know that we're giving thanks and for them to go. Okay, we're done. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining. If you have any questions, I'll be here for a bit. So.